Do you want to learn how to draw natural scenery like I do? Hi, my name is Oyun Orka, a VTuber who tries to draw, and I love drawing landscapes and natural backgrounds. So for today, let's talk about how you can draw natural scenery. So when drawing nature scenery, something that I recommend a lot is to go out and observe the natural world, take photos, and then try and learn and study from those photos to use it in your backgrounds. It's a really nice way to add a personal touch to your drawing, and also I feel like when you see something with your own eyes, you're able to understand it better. So without further ado, let's get straight into the drawing demonstration. So for today's drawing, I'll be primarily referencing this photo that I took for the background. However, even though I'm referencing different components of the photo, I'm not copying it exactly as I have an existing sketch and vision in mind. I personally find it's nice to first sketch freely and then search for references afterwards, that way I don't feel as limited when brainstorming ideas. So now I'll go ahead and finish the character drawing. Now that we've finished the flat colors, it's time to choose colors for the backgrounds. So when it comes to choosing colors, even for something as simple as mountains and foliage, there's a lot of ways you can approach it. Not only can you think about what plants and scenery there are as well as the lighting direction, but also, because nature is always influenced by season, I think it's also nice to discuss how seasons can affect what you're drawing. In the spring, as plants start to grow again, everything is very bright and fresh green. In the summer, you get less of that bright fresh green, but there's still a lot of greenery usually. In the fall, the leaves of deciduous trees turn yellow and orange and begin to fall, and by the winter, only evergreens are left. For example, in this piece, I wanted it to feel a bit more nostalgic, so I referenced a photo that I took during fall at sunset for cooler toned colors. Meanwhile, in this drawing, I wanted it to feel lighthearted and bright, so setting it during winter with a bunch of dying trees didn't really fit my vision. So when I first drew this piece, I envisioned a spring landscape with bright green grass. However, you can always correct colors later. Like in this example, I ended up preferring it to be set during fall because the colors complemented each other better, with the orange grass and the blue sky. This doesn't mean you have to choose a specific season for every single nature background you draw. Often, I also just ambiguously draw what I feel like. Art should be fun, so you should draw what you'd like. So going back to my main photo reference, I specifically chose this because it gives off a vibe of fall from the colors. I also like how this photo is taken during the afternoon, and the sun is lower on the horizon, so the lighting is a little bit more interesting. So let's start to draw the grass. So when drawing grass, I usually like drawing long, wild grass in my illustrations. You can do this by using any hard brush with pressure sensitivity and just making long strokes. Also, when drawing plants or anything in nature, there tends to be a lot of color variation due to the way that the light can affect each individual blade of grass or leaf. Even on cloudy days, when grass seems to be all pretty much the same color, if you color pick from any photo or image, there's a lot of slight variation. So to get that effect when drawing plants, you can either manually adjust the hue, value, and saturation every so often as you draw the foliage, or alternatively, you can download a foliage brush with color jitter. I've also created several brushes that may be helpful when drawing natural scenery, and you can download them on the Clip Studio Asset Store by using the link in the description down below. So I'll go ahead and use the long grass brush as well as the wheatgrass brush from my brush pack to fill in the rest of the grass. Now that that's done, let's move on to drawing the trees. So when drawing trees, I typically first draw out the trunk and any main branches, and then use any textured brush to draw out the leaves. Here I'm using the Zari pen by on Clip Studio Assets, which I've linked in the description down below. As I'm drawing the leaves for the evergreens, because I want to represent the slight curve of the needles, I just use a textured brush and then do these sorts of curved strokes repeatedly. This is because I don't want to draw every single needle individually, and each of these strokes essentially just represents a cluster of fir leaves on a twig. Now I'll go ahead and finish drawing the rest of the tree. Also, if you don't want the branches to curl upwards, some evergreens have branches that sort of point downwards as well. These are even easier to draw since usually I just do these scribbles downwards where I want the branches to go. So if you want to draw a forest, obviously this method is pretty time consuming, so instead I've also made brushes for these. Using the evergreens brush from my brush pack, I'll go ahead and add in a few more trees. So that was how to draw evergreens, but what about deciduous trees? Well, if you take a look at evergreens versus deciduous trees, you'll tend to be able to see clusters of evergreens needles more easily compared to deciduous trees. While you'll still be able to make out leaf shapes for both trees, you can simplify deciduous trees a bit more by keeping in mind that the shape is mostly round. So to represent that, since here the deciduous trees I'm drawing are more at a distance, I'll draw on the main branches first and then draw on repeated dots and kind of cluster them into a roundish shape, adding a few scribbles along the edges of where the shadow should go. Also adjust the color slightly here and there. And once again, I'll use a deciduous tree brush to fill in the rest. Speaking of distant trees, depending on the distance between the viewer and the trees Trees, or any object for that matter, will become less clear as it's further away from the viewer. Taking a look at this photo, you can see that you're able to more clearly make out the shape of the evergreen closer here versus the ones on the mountains further away. Essentially, the shape is just vague vertical lines to indicate some trees with some texture. So let's use the distant evergreens brush from my brush pack and draw in some mountains and hills. So something to keep in mind when drawing distant hills and mountains is, as you draw things further in the distance, they'll take on more of the color of the atmosphere or sky around it. Here, as the mountains get further and further from the camera, it becomes more blue. This doesn't mean that everything in the background will always turn blue, it's also dependent on the light and atmosphere colors. For example, these same mountains which look blue during the day become more purple during sunset. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to choose colors that are progressively more and more cool toned or blue, similar to the sky color, the further away the hills are from the viewer. When it comes to drawing snowy mountains, you can use any hard textured brush or just a regular brush with brush sensitivity, and what I like to do is block in the general mountain shape first, and then keeping in mind where the light source is, I'll draw where I want the snow to be. Depending on the amount of snow, the steepness of the mountains, and also exposed rocks, there might be more or less snow visible. So to represent that, I try to draw strokes kind of curving alongside the slope of the mountains, and then shade and add or erase streaks from it depending on how detailed or refined I want it to look. While I didn't end up using a very textured brush this time, for a better effect you can try using a textured brush yourself. With that done, let's finish up the illustration. So because I think the foreground and background blend a little bit too much into each other, I decided to set the foreground in a shadowy color here by using a multiply layer clipped above the foreground, which includes the grass and character. This way, there's some better separation between the grass near the viewer and the hills and the mountains in the background. Also for the character, I initially set the entire character in shadow, but because I felt like some of the details got lost, I decided to use a light orange on the same multiply layer to add a bit more light from the left side so more of the character is lit up. And after adding some finishing touches, we finish the illustration. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I would appreciate if you give this video a like, and subscribe if you'd like to see more from my channel. Also, if you'd like to learn more about how I use color and light in my art, check out the video linked on screen here. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!